Khalil Gibran on death. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond, and like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tide, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall have claimed your limbs, then shall you truly dance. So we have been spending the month on immortality, eternality, life, and death. And Reverend Karen has given us such a beautiful place to stand this last Sunday, really reminding us that we are so much more than these physical bodies. There's so much more going on to our life experience, and that when we drop this mortal flesh, we don't end. Ernest Holmes reminds us in his chapter on immortality and the science of mind, we take all of us with us, all that makes us truly who we are, not the form, but the essence, the reality of our being. And as we stand in this place, we find ourselves embracing life in a whole new way. It also gives us the opportunity to embrace death in a whole new way. And in my many years in ministry, I've had people come to me and sit with me, and I remember years ago, a woman came with her 16-year-old daughter. Please tell me, what does Science of Mind teach about abortion? I've had people speak to me about the suicide of their loved ones. What are we to make of this? How are we to understand it? And when we face the lingering illness of loved ones that are long past their life, their quality of life, and people come and ask, what shall I do? How shall I be? How shall we hold this? And so today, as we wrap up our month, it's important that we address these challenging questions: euthanasia, suicide, abortion, because we are faced with them in life. So my mother passed away in 2006. She had a stroke, and she was brought into the ICU. She was in ICU for 2 months. My sister came with my niece and my nephew to visit while she was in ICU. I spent every day there for 2 months. And we did a lot of prayer. And we held her hand. And I watched in the 2 months, I watched my mother try to die 4 times. You see, my mother at 63 was ready to go. She'd made peace with her life, peace with her world. She was ready to meet her Maker, sit with Jesus, experience the bliss of heaven. And she had no fear of death. The only thing that kept her, I think, on this plane for a little while longer was that her daughter and her grandson moved in with her. and she got to the joy of raising her grandson for a period of time. But when she was in ICU and the challenge of knowing what was happening, I remember one day my sister and I, without conversation with each other, we both went in on that day and we said to my mom, "It's okay. You can go. You've been wanting to go for a long time, and we're fine. We're all fine here. And you've had a beautiful life, and we love you, and if you want to stay, that's great. But if you're ready to go, you are blessed and released." It was interesting to watch the medical establishment each time draw her back from the brink. And finally, I remember getting the call. My mother had been moved to a nursing home. The doctors had actually said to my stepfather, "If you do not release her from the life support within the next 30 days, we will be doing it for you." But that's a challenging decision, isn't it? Especially when we are the one clinging. And I remember getting the call that morning. It was a November morning. It was cool, and the sun was shining, and the sky was blue, and the beautiful yellow leaves were drifting across the roadway as we were driving early in the morning. My mother had passed away. And on that drive with my stepfather and my son, I had such an experience. My mother's Cheshire cat smile. And she melted into the universe. And I knew how happy and okay she was, and how embraced and loved she was. It was a moment of such release and joy, such beauty. And yet, for 2 months, the medical establishment had fought against this beautiful moment. You see, we have learned to see death as a failure, a fight to the end. And we don't recognize that in today's day and age, do you know that you can't actually die of old age? You can't. You actually have to die of something. And even if you die at home, they call 911, and they have to put something on the death certificate, and they don't put, "He died of old age." And so what happens in today's day and age is that when we are ready to release our bodies, when it is time for us to go, we have to manufacture illnesses to die from. And we can hold people here beyond that time. Our prayers, after all, are answered, and our love is important to them. And so we can hold people here beyond their time when they have chosen to go. I have a dear friend who taught me how to meditate, and he had been in Paramahansa Yogananda's ashram for years, and he tells the story of Paramahansa Yogananda as he was in his much later life, later years, he was diagnosed with cancer. And he went, it's a sign. My body's ready to go. And so rather than some prolonged and protracted illness, which he knew he didn't need, he called together his monks and his foremost leaders, and he brought them into the courtyard of the ashram, and they had a beautiful meditation, and he told people what was going on, and he gave his last message. He said goodbye. He went into meditation, and he left his body because he knew he was done. And he understood the truth of us. He understood the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul, forever and ever expanding. He knew that that was the truth of him. He knew that he wasn't going to end. He was simply laying his body down because it was time. And so we get this beautiful statement from our Declaration of Principles from Ernest Holmes to remind us to stand in this place, that this is the truth. This is the truth for ourselves, and it robs our death, a pending death, of fear and of morbidity, because we actually know that we continue. It's just this body that we lay down. But we also take it as the comfort that it is when we are faced with the loss of those we love. Now, this does not mean that our human self does not grieve. Of course, our human heart, we miss the person. They've created a hole in where they used to live in our lives. We can't see them every day. I still want to call my mom up and say, oh my God, my son graduated. He's doing this, he's doing that. I can't call her on the physical phone. And so there is a missing, which is totally appropriate for our heart. It is a testament of our love and the connection that we have felt. But our grieving is robbed of its despair, of its pain, because we know the truth. This being is now freed from whatever this life has been and is now going on to that next great experience. And yet we find ourselves in our culture today, we find ourselves in our human hearts today, I think sometimes struggling with this end-of-life conversation. And how are we to be with our loved ones? My father passed away in 1999. He went through 2 years, bouts of cancer, and a hip surgery that went badly. And so I was flying back and forth 1 week a month for 2 years. In the last 6 months, I was flying back 2 weeks a month to be with him, to help him, to relieve my stepmother of the burden of taking care of him, and to sit with him. My father was a practicing alcoholic until the day he died. His wife was also a Science of Mind practitioner. I was a minister, had been for years. We did lots and lots and lots of prayer. My father did not have a deathbed awakening. He did not have a deathbed revelation. He died angry, bitter, resentful that this was his experience. When he had his final moments of challenge at home, they took him to ICU. He went to the hospital. I got the call. And they moved him from ICU into a hospital room. And the doctor said this to me. The doctor said he's in a lot of pain and he's ready to go. So we're putting him on a morphine drip, and we're dialing that morphine drip right up to the edge so that his organs will fail. But we can't do any more than that because, that would be illegal. So for 6 days, my father laid in a hospital bed. And for 6 days, I had to say to the nurse, he's on a morphine drip. It's been dialed to the point where they're letting his organs fail. Why would you give him that medicine? Why would you put him on that respirator? Why would you try to restore him in any way? I had the privilege of standing over my father's bed and saying, no, we're not going to prolong this. No, you can't do that. No, I'm sorry, all we're doing is making him comfortable. But we are not in a place or a position where we are willing to dial it up that one more time. And so my father laid there for 6 days. Now, on the third day, I had the intuition I should stay the night. And I thought, okay. They rolled in one of those chairs that open up, and I spent the night in the room with them, and in the middle of the night, I woke up. And I felt my father. He was ready to go. So I sang him home, a song that I love, Into the Presence. Would I enter now? For I am surrounded by the love of God. Let me be still and listen to the truth. Let every voice but God's be still in me. Let me remember I am one with God. And I sang it over and over and over again until it was complete. It took my father's body 3 more days to realize that he wasn't there anymore. Now, when I got home, it wasn't that much longer, not even a month. I got home and I realized that my father was living here in my consciousness. I found it a little strange. My father and I hadn't been particularly close most of my life, just the last 10 years or so. And he lived here for 2.5 years. At least that's how long it was for me. I don't know, maybe it was 5 minutes for him. I don't really know. And I could feel him. I could feel him observe his life. Oh, I would feel, that's what that was all about. Or, I'm sorry. Wow, I didn't realize that that's what was going on. Or, now I understand. I would feel these moments that my father was having. Clearly, he was having a life review. And what I noticed, there was no judgment. No judgment. Just understanding, insight, moments of aha and illumination and, now I see. And I could feel this over this 2.5-year period of time as my father lived right here in my consciousness. And I was aware that there was a moment where it was a very profound, sort of overarching, now I understand. And then he was gone. And I haven't felt him since. You see, we are eternal, immortal, deathless, changeless beings. And the continuity of our individual soul is forever and ever expanding. And when we move into that next greater plane, there's no judgment. There's no review where somebody shakes their finger at you or checks off. It's our own opportunity to learn and grow. Because we understand that we are souls on a journey. Our journey was before we were born, it will be after we die, and that journey is an opportunity of growth and learning, and every choice teaches us things about ourselves, about life, about each other, about the divine. So having these experiences and being so deeply grounded in these spiritual truths, do you see, it gives us the anchor. It gives us the rope to hold on to. It gives us this place to stand when we are confronted with the challenges of these end-of-life decisions. Shall we pull the plug? Do we take out the feeding tube? When is it time? It is only us who grieve because of our loss. We know that life goes on. And so then we have not only the end of life, we have also those times and places where beloved ones that we care about so deeply, so profoundly, choose to take their own lives. We have, most of us, been touched by suicide of one form or another. We have had that experience here in our own community in the last 5 or 6 years. Some very beloved members who ended their own lives. We've had to confront the fact that in many of these cases, there is mental illness, drugs that maybe don't do what they're supposed to do. We also know of the epidemic of suicide in our teenagers. An extraordinary epidemic. And we've seen how much of that has to do with not fitting in, not being a part of it. We've seen the enormous impact that's had on our LGBT teens. But we've seen that in places where people are in enormous pain. And I know for myself, I grew up in a tradition where suicide was considered a sin. And I never quite understood how if someone was in so much pain that they felt as though they needed to end their life, that then God would kick them when they were down. Made no sense to me. If we live in a loving universe, a universe that is so profoundly present, that lifts us and supports us and sustains us, that is the very truth of our being, that is the heart and soul within which we move, if we should become so desperate, so painful, so pain-filled in our own lives, that we would seek that solution, I believe the loving arms are just as fully there to receive those individuals. And that there is that same opportunity to learn, to grow, to see, to discover. And should we assume that every one of them is bad? If we really truly do come to that place where we recognize that our lives are the choices that we live, perhaps someone's time is up. I can never know. We can never know. And so when we are confronted with suicide, and that, my experience is why, is not a useful question. There's no answer to it. Not from this side of the veil. There's only that answer when we move beyond the human confines and the human point of view, and each of us emerges into that larger experience. And we have the opportunity to learn, to grow, to see how our choices have led us to make new ones. Because you see, we believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of every individual soul, forever and ever expanding, no matter what. You can't lose that. That can't be taken away. You can't be punished for it. You can't not have that. You don't have to earn it. It's already true. And so, again, it is our loss, our pain, our uncertainty, our wanting to know why that we get to release and to stand in that deep place of trust that no person walks through their life alone. We have not only each other, but we have that eternal presence. And that every soul is on a journey. And we can get off the bus and decide to take the train, can't we? We can move from New York to LA. We can decide to go to a foreign country. We are free to choose. And there is no one from a spiritual reality that stands in judgment of that. And so, I remember the woman who came with her daughter, her 16-year-old daughter. Petra, what do we believe about abortion? What does Science of Mind teach about abortion? And you'll notice that in all of this conversation, I haven't said, Science of Mind teaches this about suicide. Science of Mind teaches that about euthanasia. Science of Mind teaches this about abortion. Because we actually don't teach you what you should think about these things. What we seek to do is to learn how to think ourselves, to explore life from that different perspective, the spiritual perspective. Not from a human point of view or a moralistic point of view or a religious point of view, from a spiritual perspective. From the perspective that we are eternal, immortal, deathless, changeless beings, and that we are each souls on our journey, and that we are learning and growing through our choices and through our ability to love and give and be present in the world to give our gift. When I was 18 years old, I moved to Seattle when I was 17, went to school, and when I was 18, I had the good fortune of stumbling into a spiritual community, a Science of Mind community. And at that time, I had spent, as many of you know, my whole adolescence drinking, drugging. My drink of choice was the Smith & Kearns. If you know what that is, I could drink 10 of them in a night and still function. Wow. I smoked cigarettes like it was going out of style, and pot only slightly less, and any drug I could get my hands on was one worth taking. But I stumbled into a Science of Mind community out of my own suicidal depression and my own attempt to take my own life. And I found myself learning about these things, about my own soul and my own soul's journey, and that I mattered, that my life was important, that I was a part of the divine. And I began to think maybe I should start cleaning up my life. And in that moment, I found myself pregnant. And I chose to have an abortion. And I will tell you that it's the smartest decision I've ever made. I knew at the time that if I had a child, that child would be born with fetal alcohol syndrome, probably addicted to drugs, that I was in no shape or situation to manage my own life, let alone the life of someone else. And I feel so fortunate and so blessed that I had the opportunity to understand that that child, that possibility for a child, was a gift. It was just the nudge I needed to decide not only maybe I should get my life together, but oh my God, I was getting my life together. And I remember having many prayers and conversations. I recognize that you are a soul on a journey, and I thank you for waking me up. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for thinking that I might be a good mom, but no. That would be bad. I prayed, and I knew that this soul would find the perfect home, the perfect mom, the perfect situation where it could enter into its own life. But I was at choice, and I chose not to take the contract with this child. Not today. And I knew that it would move on to its great expression of life. And as I said, it was just the wake-up call I needed. Because I knew one day I would be ready. I would be ready. But I had a lot of work to do. I had to be on my journey. My soul had to wake up and grow up. And I felt so grateful to that soul for that moment. And I've never regretted that decision. And when I looked Jason in the eyes when he was born, I thought to myself, now I'm ready. Now our souls can do this together. Do you see, when we know that we are immortal, deathless, changeless beings, when we believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual life, forever and ever expanding, these moments and decisions, they're not moral moments, they're not ethical moments, they're deep moments of the soul. And we stand in that place where we are both human and spiritual. Our human selves hurt, grieve, wrestle, process, wonder whether it's the right thing to do or not. And our spiritual selves knows the truth. That we walk through this life on the journey of our souls. That the love that we are is the very presence of life itself. That it is the gift that we are expressing and experiencing. And that no matter what, that cannot be taken away. It can't die. It can't go anywhere. Ernest Holmes, in our beautiful book of the month, the very last page, I'll give it away. If you haven't gotten to the last page yet, the read is really great right up to it. We shall be like the prodigal son, who returning to his father's house was amazed that the father came forth to meet him. That divine protection placed on his shoulders the seamless robe of perfection, while divine bounty welcomed him with a table spread with the gifts of life. The father had never deserted him at all. He had merely wandered into a far land, and he had imagined himself separated from his good. We shall also be like the prodigal's brother, who complained that he had remained in his father's house laboring, but that the father had not spread a table for him that he might entertain his friends. For the father will also say to us, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. The cry, why hast thou forsaken me, will be lost in the exalted concept that they that dwell in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. We must seek the source of life if we would live. And no longer seeing through as a glass darkly, we shall be gently led from our canyons of delusionment into the fertile valleys of peace, through which flow the river of life. Being individuals, the choice is ours. Being divine, we seek freedom. Being immortal, we shall find it. So they're hard topics, challenging topics. We've lost children too soon, loved ones before we were ready for them to go. We've all had a story about death in our lives. And the question is, where will we stand as we look back on those or as we confront them today? So I've asked Andrew to close with this song. And the song was written by a man who sent his family on ahead. He was they were moving across the ocean, and the mom and the boys, they went on ahead. Unfortunately, the ship sank, and all hands were lost. And later, as the father made the same journey, the captain, as they were sailing, the captain said, it was here that the ship went down. And from that experience, he wrote this song.
attendeth my way. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. 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 And Lord, haste the day when my fame shall be sight, the cloud be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even then it is well with my soul. 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 It is well with my soul.
We find that place that it is well with our souls because we know the truth of who we are. We know this life is God's life. And the truth is, do you see, we will learn and grow and become more of ourselves, whatever choice we make. If we are a woman who is faced with the thought of an unwanted child, we choose to have an abortion, we will learn and grow. And that may be the right choice. For another woman, the choice is to have the child, give it to adoption for someone who can't have a child. And we learn and grow. For another, it is the opportunity to have the child and allow the child to grow them. And we learn and grow. How we see our beloveds who have committed suicide, or those we don't even know, and our heart bleeds. It's an opportunity in every moment for us to share more love, to hold out our hands to each other, to see how much we need each other. Because this is the place where God shows up. Your hand is God's hand. Your heart is the very heart of life, opening itself up and wrapping itself around the one you love, not in fear, in trust, in faith. Do you see? This is the gift we give each other when we know the truth of who we are. And then, even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we do find that somewhere, somehow, it is well with our souls because we know it is well with each other's soul. There's nowhere to go but God. So it is.
It is. The truth is that we never walk alone. We walk in community. Even though times do get hard, even though sometimes we don't know exactly where to turn, but we have that spirit within us all the time, among us, through us. Always. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of Allah. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams